Number 8. Jacob Yerkes. In a disturbing act of entitlement that was captured on camera in 2022, a Loudoun County, Tennessee man openly admitted to police that he chased after a female colleague when she rejected his romantic advances. Later identified as Jacob Yerkes and dubbed a delusional incel by the internet at large, the suspect could be heard telling officers that he visited a Cracker Barrel restaurant where he and the victim worked and tried to woo her with a romantic song. While recording the conversation with his cell phone, Yerkes went on to state that when the woman saw him, she immediately left the restaurant. He said he followed her for several blocks as she tried to get away from him. When it didn't go as planned, Yerkes went to the police and reported the woman's father for allegedly calling him from a blocked phone number and threatening him. The conversation only got more disturbing as Yerkes said that he thinks women enjoy being chased and that they even secretly fantasize about non-consensual encounters. Needless to say, the cops were disturbed by the man's behavior. They told him to leave the woman alone and would soon launch an investigation into the matter. Meanwhile, Yerkes returned to his car as he launched into a vicious diatribe about the LGBT community and how he was trying to turn the victim straight. Authorities claim to find even more videos that Yerkes had posted online in which he allegedly threatens violence but doesn't name names. The disturbing footage went viral, with social media users overwhelmingly agreeing that the man in the video is a danger to women. Following the investigation, Yerkes was charged with aggravated stalking and harassment. While the outcome of the case is unclear, records show that he's currently on probation for a closed criminal matter. Number 7. Man taunts police with donut. Anger over the seemingly endless problem of American cops killing unarmed black men reached a fever pitch in 2020. Things only escalated with the murder of George Floyd at the hands of former Minneapolis officer Derek Chauvin. Society became dangerously polarized as movements demanding social justice and supporting the police came to be seen as the antithesis to one another. About 2 months after Floyd's death, an 18-year-old man showed up at a pro-police rally in Everett, Washington, and taunted attendees and police. Bystander footage showed the teen dangling a donut from a stick in front of a cop's face. He could also be heard repeatedly asking if anyone wanted a bite of the donut and calling the police bootlickers. Dubbed Back the Blue Rally, the event was sponsored by the Snohomish County Republican Party. An estimated 300 guests showed up to listen to various speakers, including political candidates and Snohomish County Sheriff Adam Fortney. At this point in time, it was only expected that counter-protesters would be present at the rally. Most carried out their demonstrations peacefully from the other side of the street, but the donut-toting young man made sure his presence was noticed. According to a police report, Police Marshal James Simonecci pushed the man away after having the donut dangled in front of him. He then arrested the teen on suspicion of fourth-degree assault. While it's unclear how the case turned out, many people felt that the young man did not take his behavior far enough to deserve being arrested or jailed. He wasn't seen touching anyone, and some bystanders perceived him as a teenager pulling a relatively harmless prank. Others saw it as disrespectful and harassing rather than as an immature but forgivable joke. According to the Everett Herald, the suspect had a history of run-ins with the police, which included allegations of assault, malicious mischief, and harassment. Number 6. Tatiana Remley. From the outside looking in, Mark and Tatiana Remley were living the dream in Southern California. Based on 42-year-old Tatiana's social media posts, the couple appeared to be both happy and extremely rich. Her photos regularly featured the trappings of a glamorous lifestyle, including expensive sports cars, designer duds, travel, and an upscale home. But what people show on social media is often an illusion, and the marriage soured behind closed doors on the heels of several failed business ventures undertaken by the pair. The Remleys separated in May 2023, and in July, Tatiana filed for divorce, requesting $15,000 in monthly support payments and control of multiple assets. By then, she was already under investigation for trying to hire a hitman to murder her 57-year-old estranged husband. Mark later told the Coast News that he learned about the plot from a friend who Tatiana had approached about the murder for hire. According to the San Diego Sheriff's Department, Tatiana met with an undercover cop posing as a hitman in early August. She provided a down payment and 3 guns, along with specifics on how she wanted Mark killed and disposed of. Just a month earlier, one of the estranged couple's properties had been destroyed in a fire. Emergency responders arrived to find Tatiana at the home with several guns in her possession. The fire remains under investigation. Tatiana is now behind bars, facing charges for solicitation of murder and carrying a concealed weapon without a permit. Number 5. Valentine Kazine. Detectives at the Plainfield Police Department in Indiana were faced with the uncomfortable task of investigating one of their own after receiving a tip in June of 2023 about possible false crime reports and harassment. According to court documents, a gas station clerk told investigators that one of the agency's police officers, Valentine Kazine, had asked him to file false complaints against a police sergeant. Kazine's alleged goal was to prevent the sergeant from being promoted to a lieutenant position that he hoped to score. The gas station clerk claimed that Kazine asked him to dictate 3 letters to various local government entities containing serious allegations of abuse against the sergeant. In explaining how he got roped into the mess, the clerk said that he had established a rapport with Kazine, who, like many cops, was a regular at the store and often came in during his coffee breaks. Court records state that Kazine promised to compensate the clerk in the future with unspecified eventual quid pro quo. A fake letter was drawn up and the clerk presented it to Kazine at the store one night while detectives conducted surveillance. Kazine allegedly looked at the letter for a few moments before abruptly saying, "Yeah," and questioning the clerk about the camera he was wearing on his shirt, which was recording the interaction. During questioning by investigators, Kazine reportedly admitted that he hated the sergeant he was trying to sabotage. While the colleagues were competing for a promotion, their strained relationship dated back to a year earlier when the sergeant tried to assign Kazine to a call he didn't want to take. But Kazine denied any knowledge of the letter he had been shown at the gas station and claimed to know nothing of a plot to ruin the sergeant's reputation. When presented with footage of the conversation with the gas station clerk, Kazine ended the interview. He resigned from the force in August and is now facing criminal charges of felony official misconduct and misdemeanor false informing. Number 4. Angelina Cando. Early one morning in February 2023, someone lit a gay pride flag on fire outside the Little Prince restaurant in New York City's Soho neighborhood. Surveillance footage showed a woman setting the flag ablaze before driving off in an SUV. An employee witnessed the act from inside and dialed 911. Investigators speculated that the suspect was angered by the rainbow flag slogan, which read, "Make America Gay Again." The apartments above the restaurant were temporarily evacuated, and the fire caused some exterior damage, but thankfully nobody was injured. According to the restaurant's owner, the pride flag had been stolen in the past, but this particular act was met with widespread outrage from New Yorkers who perceived the hate crime as an attempt to intimidate the community. Instead of responding with fear, people came together in a moving display of solidarity, showing that this type of behavior won't be tolerated in the Big Apple. The ruined flag was replaced with an even bigger one, and a local company fixed the damaged landscaping for free. Needless to say, the previously unknown 30-year-old suspect turned herself into a pariah overnight. Angelina Cando was charged with arson, criminal mischief, and reckless endangerment, all with hate crime enhancements. She was found mentally unfit to stand trial following multiple courtroom meltdowns and a psychiatric evaluation, and some people strongly disagree with the decision due to the seemingly deliberate nature of her alleged crimes. But regardless of the legal consequences or lack thereof, Cando won't exactly be able to live down her behavior anytime soon, and many would argue that she has only herself to blame for it. Number 3. George Lowry. While responding to a call in early May of 2022, deputies at Elmore County, Alabama, arrived at a residence to find 31-year-old George Lowry suffering from a gunshot wound. The woman who shot him identified herself as Lowry's former girlfriend and told police that Lowry had a history of stalking her. She accused him of following her to her home and attacking her. During the assault, she managed to grab her gun and fired 3 shots, one of which struck Lowry in the jaw. Investigators reportedly saw Lowry spitting out several of his teeth afterward. According to the sheriff's office, Lowry had trespassed onto the victim's property with a pry bar, handcuffs, binoculars, and knives in his possession. He had also allegedly been video recording the woman for several days without her knowledge. In a statement, Sheriff Bill Franklin said that the woman acted well within her right to shoot Lowry in self-defense. She was cleared of any wrongdoing. After receiving treatment for his injuries, Lowry was booked into the Elmore County Jail on charges of second-degree stalking and attempted burglary. Number 2. Melody Sassa. By now, many, if not most people, have realized that the vast majority of websites on the dark web that advertise hitman services are fake. It's also common knowledge that the FBI and other intelligence agencies monitor the dark web specifically for people who seek to involve themselves in nefarious underworld activities. A Tennessee woman named Melody Sassa was apparently unaware of all this, or perhaps she knew and took her chances anyway when she allegedly sought a hitman on the dark web through a website called Online Killers Market. According to court documents, Sassa wanted the wife of a man she met on Match.com murdered. She had connected with the man when he was single and was reportedly furious when he told her he was engaged. The intended target of the murder plot told police that Sassa had shown up at the couple's house unannounced. Around the same time, the victim's vehicle was vandalized and she began receiving harassing and threatening phone calls from blocked numbers. Sassa allegedly told the murder-for-hire website that she wanted the victim's death to seem like an accident, or at least something that would result in a short investigation at the most. According to investigators, she placed the order in January 2023 and made a $10,000 Bitcoin payment to the website. 2 months later, Sassa complained to the site about how long it was taking for the hit to be carried out. She was arrested in May on a federal murder-for-hire charge and remains behind bars after pleading not guilty. If convicted, she could face 10 years in prison, 3 years of supervised release, and a fine of up to $250,000. Number 1. Nadia Atis. In a chilling expose published by the New York Times in early 2021, a 60-year-old Toronto woman named Nadia Atis was accused of using the internet as a tool in her attempts to ruin dozens of people's lives in numerous countries. She allegedly slandered her perceived enemies with totally baseless yet highly damaging claims, including allegations of people committing heinous and unconscionable crimes. According to the Times article, Atis accused people of being thieves and scammers, having the most inappropriate types of relationships imaginable, committing horrific abuse, and betraying their loved ones in the most unforgivable ways. In an era where internet laws and protection against online crimes have not kept up with the times, predatory, revenge-driven individuals are eager to use it as a means of inflicting mental torment and permanently smearing someone's image. As many of Atta's alleged victims discovered, getting false information removed from the web is a lot harder than many people realize until they're being slandered relentlessly online. Damage control against a determined attacker's onslaught is extremely difficult, if not impossible, to keep up with, and many law enforcement agencies lack the capabilities and/or the willingness to investigate reports of internet crimes. It's no wonder then that a lot of people who find themselves in the same shoes as Atta's accusers eventually start to feel hopeless and like they'll never get their lives back. Shortly after the Times piece was published, Canadian authorities charged Atis with 10 counts each of harassment, defamatory libel, and spreading false information with the intent to alarm. Even after being ordered by a judge to stop smack-talking people online, the posts allegedly continued. Unfortunately, and much to the dismay of the accused serial slanderers' accusers, the charges against Atis were dropped entirely just months later. In an ironic and infuriating twist, Atis sued the Times and dozens of other defendants for allegedly publishing false and defamatory statements about her. Atis could sue people until she was blue in the face if she wanted, but she can't undo the course of events that led to widespread coverage of her alleged actions. She can't cause people to forget the things she's been accused of, and the exposure the case received made it a lot harder for her to comfortably hide behind a screen. If nothing else, the coverage served as a reminder that people are paying attention, and it gave the accusers a platform for voicing their side of the story. Number 20. Fake robbery backfires. In 2014, Australian YouTubers Daniel Marin, Robert Malazzo, and George Prostus thought it would be a good idea to stage a fake robbery. Their target was an ATM in Sydney. The group of friends filmed themselves pretending to rob each other, with one of the men posing as a thief while his friend pretended to use an ATM at a shopping centre. The two then started to wrestle on the floor, attracting the attention of a witness passing by who quickly rushed over to help. The witness punched one of the men in the face and actually broke his nose. The footage first popped up on the YouTube channel Reckless Youth about a decade ago. It resurfaced again in 2023 after it was discovered by Barstool Sports. During the chaos of the fake encounter, one of the friends could be heard on the video yelling that it was just a prank, but it was already too late for the injured man, whose nose was spewing a river of blood. One of the YouTubers said later on that the group performed the prank as a social experiment to see if people would step in to stop a robbery, but the video got a lot more negative feedback than they were expecting, with many viewers saying that the concept was dumb. Others took satisfaction in seeing one of the men get his nose broken for the stupid stunt. All things considered, the outcome of the situation could have been way worse. In February 2021, another YouTuber named Timothy Wilkes and his friend pranked a small group of strangers in Nashville, Tennessee, by pretending to rob them. The prank was made even worse considering the men confronted the strangers at knife point. With the camera rolling, the pair walked up to the targets outside of an indoor trampoline park with butcher knives in their hands. This was a terrible idea for so many obvious reasons, and it wasn't necessarily surprising when a member of the group shot Wilkes with a gun. The 20-year-old died from his injuries, and the man who fired the weapon, 23-year-old David Starnes Jr., clarified that he was not in on the prank and had no idea the robbery was set up. Starnes was not charged for the shooting, which was deemed completely justified under the state's self-defense laws. YouTube banned dangerous and harmful pranks 2 years before the death of Wilkes. Fake robberies were specifically included on the list of things that would result in a video being removed from the streaming site. And tragedies like this are a reminder that the policy exists for good reason. Number 19. Sydney Mourn. 22-year-old Jonathan Gilbert, or Tyler Lane, got caught up in a so-called lover's quarrel back in 2023 after getting close with a woman named Kaylee Morgan. Gilbert's ex-boyfriend, 18-year-old Sydney Mourn, allegedly grew jealous of Gilbert's new connection. While visiting a family friend in Spalding County, Georgia in July of that year, a trio of suspects egged the house Gilbert and Morgan were staying in. Authorities later identified the pranksters as Sydney, 18-year-old Jeremy Munson, and 19-year-old Mackenzie Davenport. Gilbert went outside to face off with the vandals, who quickly ran back to their car. He chased after them and was shot multiple times by one of the people inside the vehicle as he approached the car. Morgan told news station later in an interview that Gilbert collapsed and was begging for his life. Someone then stole a necklace holding the ashes of the young man's deceased father, and the suspects left the scene. Officers got there and found Gilbert dead in the middle of the street. Mourn, Munson, and Davenport are all facing multiple charges, including malice murder, battery, and criminal trespass. According to police, Sydney was the one who fired the gunshots, while Jeremy ripped Gilbert's necklace straight off his neck. The pair are facing additional charges of aggravated assault and possession of a firearm during the commission of a felony on top of the others. Number 18. TikTok pranksters picks the wrong victim. A TikTok creator named Jay, who goes by the username JKindaFunny8, is well known for his elaborate pranks, which often involve sneaking up behind strangers with a megaphone and shouting the word Monano. According to one source, this word means morning eater, while others say that it's not even a real word. In early 2022, Jay quietly approached a large man from behind and tried to carry out one of these pranks, but it didn't exactly go as planned. Before he knew it, the target had the content creator on the floor in a headlock before he could even get a word out. Jay could be heard on video insisting it was a prank, and thankfully nothing too serious seems to have come of the situation. The footage went viral, receiving divided reactions on whether or not the stranger overreacted, or if he gave Jay a well-deserved taste of his own medicine. Number 17. Deadly Ding Dong Ditch. A game of Ding Dong Ditch proved fatal for a Florida teen back in 2003 after knocking on the wrong man's door. In what initially seemed like a harmless prank, Mark Drews and his friends spent their Friday night knocking on a couple of neighbors' doors on Boca Raton and then mischievously running away. One homeowner, 40-year-old J. Stephen Levin, mistook the 6'2" teenager as a burglar and answered the door with a gun in his hand. He shot at Drews, who collapsed while running away and died later on that night at a hospital. Levin told police officers that it looked like Drews had something in his hand when he knocked and that he reacted out of the belief that it was a weapon. The tragedy left community members and Floridians divided on whether or not Levin acted within his rights under the state's Stand Your Ground law. Friends, family members, and other supporters of Drews' family wanted to see charges against Levin and were angry when the investigation dragged on longer than they thought it should have without any arrests. It was later revealed that Drews was shot in the back, showing that he wasn't posing a threat to Levin at the time of the shooting. Prosecutors ultimately decided to move forward with a manslaughter charge against Levin, who pleaded guilty in exchange for a 10-year probation sentence. He also agreed to complete 1,250 hours of community service. For the first year of his probation, Levin went to jail every Saturday and Sunday from 8:00 a.m. to 4 p.m. He decided to contribute $2.50 per week toward a scholarship fund in Drews' honor and was required to sincerely and publicly take responsibility for his actions. The Drews family was extremely upset when Levin tried to put an end to his probation early in 2009, after serving just 5 years. Speaking with the Palm Beach Post, Mark Drews said that Levin expressed remorse to the family in court and then seemed to take it back completely during a civil trial just 3 years later, saying that he never meant a word of his original apology. Prosecutors claimed that the Drews specifically agreed with the clause in Levin's plea agreement about being able to end his probation early if he satisfied every clause. But Mark Drews claimed he was unaware of the stipulation until Levin actually put in the application to end his supervision. Much to the family's dismay, a judge granted the early termination, and Levin was free. Number 16. The Great Blue Hill Eruption. An April Fool's prank that took place in Milton, Massachusetts worked a bit too well when it caused hundreds of people to panic about a possible volcanic eruption in the area. It all started with a fake news broadcast by local station WNAC-TV, which claimed that the nearby Great Blue Hill had started spewing lava and flames. Standing at around 635 feet tall, the Great Blue Hill is located 10 miles outside Boston, near the towns of Milton, Randolph, and Canton. It's the tallest point in all of Norfolk County. The prank report said that the erupting hill was spraying ash onto nearby homes and properties. In reality, the Great Blue Hill isn't even volcanic. Created by Boston TV news producer Homer Silly, the report contained fake warnings from then-President Jimmy Carter and then-Governor Edward King, made from spliced clips of a past speech. It included images of the eruption of Mount St. Helens, which had happened just a few days earlier. Reporter Jan Harrison said that the Blue Hill disaster was caused by a chain of geological reactions resulting from the Mount St. Helens eruption in Washington state. At the end of the broadcast, Harrison held up a small sign that said April Fools. But by then, many local residents had already gone into panic mode and had stopped watching the TV, not noticing the sign. People began to flee their homes while dozens of calls flooded into local police stations and the Massachusetts Department of Civil Defense. After realizing the report was a prank, dozens of angry civilians called WNAC. The station apologized later that night during its 11 p.m. late-night news broadcast. Homer Silly was fired the next day for failing to exercise good news judgment and for violating the Federal Communications Commission's policy against showing shocking footage without informing the audience beforehand. Number 15. Timmy Hill. In the summer of 2014, after a late-night swim, two teenage boys thought it would be funny to throw their soaking wet underwear onto a West Virginia state trooper's parked cruiser. 18-year-old Timmy Hill was there with the other two young men that night, but didn't participate in the underwear prank. The commotion from the boys laughing awoke Trooper B.D. Gillespie's wife, who in turn notified her husband of the situation. Determined to catch and punish the pranksters, Gillespie quickly put on his uniform, called his work to report that he was going on duty, and went driving around in search of the mischievous trio. He eventually managed to track the teens down nearby and got into a scuffle with Hill, who was allegedly being uncooperative outside the young man's house in Mercer County. Gillespie pepper-sprayed Hill during the fight, hit him in the head with a service baton, and shot him twice, killing him right there at the scene. A grand jury declined to press charges against Gillespie after determining that he acted reasonably with deadly force, even though Hill was unarmed at the time of the fatal encounter. It was later revealed that Gillespie and Hill had a long, troubled history, which started over Gillespie's disapproval of Hill riding his four-wheeler around their quiet neighborhood. According to a lawsuit filed by Hill's family, Gillespie frequently watched the teen using binoculars and a radar gun. The trooper also allegedly filmed Hill at one point with a camcorder. In the lawsuit, the Hill family accused Gillespie of making multiple unwarranted house calls, warning them to keep Timmy's behavior in check, and that he had the law on his side if anything were to happen. The allegations are enough to make you wonder if Gillespie had it out for Hill. All legal matters around the tragedy have since been settled, but questions regarding the events leading up to the shooting continue to linger. Unfortunately, nobody will know the exact details of what went down that fateful night. Number 14. Nerk Galley. In September 2013, during a deadly encounter that's been described by investigators as unintended and extremely tragic, 18-year-old Pramila Lal was killed by a family friend at a house in Longmont, Colorado. Lal and her family had recently moved out of the home where the crime took place and were having 21-year-old Nerk Galley watch the property for them. Galley was playing some video games with Pramila's younger brother one night when they started hearing movement within the home. As far as the two young men knew, they were the only ones in the house, or at least the only people who were supposed to be there. Afraid that an intruder was inside, Galley quickly grabbed his gun, gave a weapon to Pramila's brother, and began searching for the unwelcome visitor. Little did either of the men know, Pramila and her cousin had quietly snuck into the house to play a prank on them. When Pramila jumped out from a closet to scare Galley, he was armed and ready to shoot. He pulled the trigger before even realizing that it was the teen playing a harmless joke. Pramila passed away thanks to her injuries, and Galley was charged with reckless endangerment and a few other counts, including a gun charge. Authorities acknowledged that Galley didn't actually mean to kill Pramila, but they went back and forth on whether or not the shooting constituted a homicide. Galley was never charged with killing Pramila and seems to have squared away his legal issues. Number 13. Toilet paper tragedy. One night in 2010, when 34-year-old Alabama firefighter James Luther McRae noticed a few teens lurking in his yard, he thought they were trying to break into the home. After realizing that they'd been spotted, the teens got into a car and drove away. McRae dialed 911 and reported the incident while chasing after the kids in his own truck. He tried getting close enough to the teens' car to get the license plate number, but accidentally lost control of his truck, overcorrected, and crashed into a nearby fence. The truck then rolled over, and McRae, who wasn't wearing his seatbelt, was ejected from the vehicle. He died from his injuries. Investigators traced the incident to a group of 3 teenage girls and a young man. The high schoolers worked with law enforcement and explained that they were toilet papering the homes of 2 of McRae's neighbors as part of their senior prank. They didn't mean for anyone to get hurt because of their actions. Escambia County Sheriff Grover Smith told AL.com that the area had a long-standing tradition of toilet papering and other pranks among high school seniors close to graduation. After McRae's death, he announced the implementation of a zero-tolerance policy toward these pranks in the future. Smith said that he wasn't trying to put youngsters in jail, but that things had to change now that a man needlessly lost his life by trying to protect his home and family. Number 12. Susan Tammy Hudson. A 52-year-old Tennessee woman named Susan Tammy Hudson thought it would be funny to convince her sister Helen that she killed her husband as an April Fool's prank back in 2013. She told Helen that she fatally shot the unfortunate victim and that she had to clean up the mess. Hudson suggested that she and her sister bury her husband's body in the nearby town of Blackwater, which straddles the Tennessee-Virginia border. But it was no laughing matter when police showed up at the woman's house after getting a report from a relative about the alleged murder. Hudson was quickly taken into custody, but she managed to avoid getting arrested after proving that her husband was actually alive and well, and that she had no real intentions to harm or kill him. After the misunderstanding was settled, Hudson told local news station WKPT 19 that she should be careful about the types of jokes she plays on gullible possible relatives in the future. But she praised the local police department for their quick response and cited their appearance as an impressive display of the agency's effectiveness. Thankfully, nobody was hurt as a result of the prank, which came just days after a young woman from Wagner County, Oklahoma, named Tori Wheeler, told her boyfriend that she was pregnant. It wasn't true, and Wheeler's partner, Derek Bauer, didn't think it was very funny. In fact, he was pretty upset about it, and Wheeler allegedly responded to the reaction by threatening the man with a knife. Bauer then dialed 911, at which point Wheeler flew into a rage and cut his throat. Luckily, he survived, and according to police, Wheeler admitted to the violent confrontation. While Bauer was given stitches for his wounds, Wheeler was charged with assault. Number 11. The prank that nearly started a war. Back in 1986, an Israeli intelligence analyst played an April Fool's prank by spreading a false report that an assassination attempt was made on Lebanese Shiite Muslim leader Nabi Berri. According to the bogus report, Berri had been seriously wounded. It was sent out to several government officials and a state-owned radio station, which broadcasted the report to a wider audience in both Israeli and English. The hoax was not only distasteful, it caused increased tensions in a region that was already plagued by poor relations between multiple countries. After realizing the report was fake, the Israeli military scrambled to take back the news and make sure people knew it wasn't true. It especially didn't help that Berri's supporters saw Israel as untrustworthy and shrouded in conspiracies. Thankfully, action was taken fast enough to stop the fake news from cycling even further, sparing tensions in the Middle East from flaring too out of control. The officer behind the prank was sentenced to just 35 days detention. Number 10. Adrien Broadway. In early 2014, a group of teenagers in Little Rock, Arkansas, decided to take revenge against a fellow high schooler who pulled a prank against them on Halloween a few months before. They went to the target's home and covered a vehicle that was parked in the driveway with toilet paper, eggs, and even mayonnaise. As the group left the property, a man came running out of the house with a gun and opened fire on the teens. One of the bullets struck a young girl named Adrien Broadway in the head. She was killed by her injuries, and one of her friends survived after getting hit in the arm. Authorities charged the shooter, 48-year-old Willie Noble, with first-degree murder, committing a terroristic act, and 5 counts of aggravated assault. Noble told police officers that he wasn't aiming at anyone in particular and that he didn't mean to actually shoot and hurt anyone. His intention was to simply scare the teens, and he claimed that he was pointing the gun up while he shot. Arkansas doesn't have a stand-your-ground law similar to those in Texas and Florida, which gives property owners a lot of wiggle room for being able to legally shoot trespassers. The state's law does give leeway to homeowners who defend the perimeter of their home in certain cases, leaving many afraid that Noble might be able to get out of the murder charge. But that never actually happened. A jury found Noble guilty, and he was sentenced to 30 years in prison with eligibility for parole after serving 21 years. He'll become officially eligible for parole in October 2036. Number 9. Nicholas Bell. When their family homes were too overcrowded during Thanksgiving in 2010, buddies Jeffrey Charbonneau and Nicholas Bell decided to stay at a friend's house in Manchester, Vermont. Something went terribly wrong, though, resulting in a 911 call from Bell claiming that he accidentally shot Charbonneau in the chest with what he thought was a simple BB gun. According to several reports, Bell planned to prank Charbonneau by shooting the gun to wake him up. But the weapon wasn't just a BB gun. It was a loaded .22 caliber rifle, and a bullet struck Charbonneau fatally in the chest. He was just 24 years old at the time of his death. Someone familiar with the incident disputed claims about the tragedy being a prank gone wrong, but confirmed that Bell mistook the rifle for a BB gun and was examining the weapon when it accidentally went off. Either way, it was agreed upon by law enforcement that the young man didn't mean to kill Charbonneau, and that Bell's lack of experience with guns likely contributed to the shooting. But Bell still had to answer for his actions, so the 23-year-old was charged with manslaughter, assault with a weapon, and reckless endangerment. He pleaded no contest to every count. Bell was sentenced to serve 1 year in prison and also received a 7-year suspended sentence, which meant he would serve 1 year and remain free for the rest of his sentence as long as he followed the rules set by the court. He cried and apologized profusely at the sentencing hearing, but the victim's family wasn't ready to forgive yet. They urged the judge to impose the maximum prison sentence and were disappointed by what seemed like a slap on the wrist to Bell for taking a human life. The judge acknowledged that the family's frustrations were all valid, but noted that the law punishes accidental deaths differently than those that are caused on purpose. And in the absence of intent, the conviction and sentence were well in line with what the law called for. The punishment was also based on Bell being unlikely to reoffend and his lack of a need for rehabilitation. Number 8. Honoring the Boston Strangler. Albert DeSalvo, or the Boston Strangler, brutally killed at least 13 women in and around Boston between the years 1962 and 1964. He was also a serial attacker who was imprisoned for life in 1967 after assaulting multiple women. While in prison, DeSalvo confessed to the Boston Strangler murders, but he was never convicted for any of the crimes. His guilt remains a large topic of speculation and debate even to this day, although DNA evidence has linked him to at least one of the deaths. Many who knew DeSalvo personally didn't think he would ever be capable of murder, even though he wasn't exactly the sweet and innocent type. Either way, he went down in history as the Boston Strangler. In 1973, DeSalvo was stabbed and killed in prison at the age of 42. Back in 1971, Texas State Representative Tom Moore, Jr. introduced a proposition to commend Albert DeSalvo as an upstanding citizen who unselfishly served his country, his state, and his community. Moore sponsored the proposal mainly as an April Fool's Day prank because he knew his colleagues often passed bills and resolutions without actually reading them thoroughly. The text described DeSalvo as a compassionate gentleman who enabled the weak and the lonely throughout the nation to achieve and maintain a new degree of concern for their future. Specifically, the resolution commended the killer for his innovative population control and applied psychology techniques. Just as Moore expected, the resolution to honor DeSalvo passed without issue. He withdrew it before it could be put through, and he explained that he pulled the prank to make a point about how state lawmakers often passed legislation without reading it or properly researching topics. The stunt may have not looked that great to the public, but it wasn't surprising to many who are familiar with how the process of passing law works. As Snopes founder David Mickelson said, "It's usually expected that lawmakers will rubber stamp a proposed resolution honoring a person as a gesture of goodwill to their colleague who introduced it." But Moore made a point by highlighting the need for legislators to be better when it comes to doing due diligence. Number 7. Danny Crawford. One night back in 2006, a teenager named Danny Crawford and two of his friends passed the time by throwing eggs at passing vehicles in Columbus, Ohio. But Michael Gross and his son Michael Jr. didn't think it was very funny when eggs splattered against the outside of their Jeep Cherokee. Gross got out of the car and chased away the teens, and at some point he even began firing. Crawford died at the scene from a single gunshot. Police impounded the Jeep shortly after the crime, but it wasn't until months later that they discovered the gun that was used in the shooting under the vehicle's hood. An arrest finally came about 4 years after Crawford's death in 2010, when Gross was officially charged with murder and tampering with evidence. He took a plea deal at the 11th hour to avoid a trial and admitted to everything. He was sentenced to 15 years in prison, which Crawford's family didn't think was long enough. They were also very upset that the case didn't go to trial like they'd hoped, and that the plea deal was sprung on them. Danny Crawford's mother, Nancy, told local news station WPNS that the desire for Gross to get the maximum sentence wasn't rooted in hate. In fact, she said they'd forgiven Gross for taking Danny's life, and that she hoped her family would get to a place of healing where they could think about Danny without having to think about the graphic circumstances surrounding his death. Number 6. Richard Nixon radio prank. On April Fool's Day 1992, National Public Radio announced during its Talk of the Nation program that Richard Nixon had plans to run for president. Richard Nixon resigned in 1974 to avoid getting impeached over the infamous Watergate scandal. In short, the scandal involved numerous illegal and unethical activities committed by members of the Nixon administration, including bugging the offices of several political opponents and harassing activists. These activities were publicized after after 5 men were caught breaking into the Democratic Party's national headquarters at the Watergate complex in Washington, D.C. It opened up a floodgate in terms of exposing the shady undertakings that had been carried out under Nixon's watch, and his efforts to downplay the scandal failed completely. Nobody ever imagined that Nixon would try to run for president again, and he didn't, but many certainly thought he was planning on it when they heard the fake April Fool's broadcast. During the announcement, the show played a clip of what sounded like Nixon saying, "I never did anything wrong and I won't do it again." It was then followed by a seemingly serious analysis of Nixon's decision to run for president and how it may potentially affect the race. Listeners were shocked, to say the least. Calls flooded into NPR from people eager to express their disapproval. By the time host John Hockenberry announced during the second half of the show that the announcement was a prank and that an impersonator was behind Nixon's voice, thousands of people had already fallen for it. They were most likely relieved to find out that it was a prank and that they could call off any plans to protest. Number 5. Randy Lee Tenley. In a bizarre bid to stir reports of Bigfoot sightings, 44-year-old Randy Lee Tenley put on a costume of the mythical creature one night back in 2012 and creepily walked along Highway 93 in Kalispell, Montana. Authorities later said that alcohol may have been a factor in Tenley's choice of activities. The prank went horribly wrong, though, when Tenley was hit by a car and was left helplessly lying in the road, where he was eventually hit by another vehicle. He died from his injuries, and the 2 teenage drivers who crashed into him were left traumatized. Montana State Trooper Jim Schneider told the Daily Interlake that he had never seen a case like this happen before. In his words, "You can't make it up." He went on to explain that the type of costume Tenley was wearing, known as a ghillie suit, is made to resemble thick foliage. It's often used to camouflage military snipers and would have made it pretty difficult for drivers to see him until they had little to no time to avoid him. Number 4. Peter Wade. In July 1982, while drinking alcohol and smoking pot along some railroad tracks in Fair Lawn, New Jersey, a group of teenagers decided it would be fun to derail a train. After waiting for an oncoming passenger train to pass, Peter Benton and Peter Wade threw the nearby switch. The train came hurtling along at 60 miles per hour and quickly flew off the rails. It crashed into a pasta factory nearby, turning the locomotive and 5 passenger cars into a mangled mess of metal. At the time, there were only 5 passengers and 2 members of the crew on the train. They all luckily survived with minor injuries, but the engineer, 50-year-old Jack Duffy, was crushed to death. The teens left the scene and learned about Duffy's death not long after. 5 suspects were arrested in connection to the horrific prank, and Wade and Benton were among the 3 who faced some of the most serious charges. Wade pleaded guilty to manslaughter and was ordered to serve up to 5 years behind bars. Benton and a 3rd defendant, Randy Lee Gelb, were given the same sentence. Wade was released at the age of 20 after serving about 22 months. He went on to make $1 million a year as a successful stock analyst on Wall Street. On the outside, he had turned his life around, but the guilt he felt over his crime slowly ate away at him, and in the early 2000s he decided to shift gears and pursue a filmmaking career. His debut film, Tracks, tells his story as a wayward teen who set his path straight after a tragedy. When Jack Duffy's surviving loved ones learned about the movie, they were understandably upset. To them, it seemed like Wade was capitalizing on their loved one's death, and they felt the storyline sent the wrong message. That a teenager can do something horrific, resulting in the loss of a human life, and still go on to be wildly successful. During interviews about the movie, Wade referred to the derailment as the accident, causing many to wonder if he had really come to terms with his role in the destructively deliberate act. He also hesitated to describe the act as premeditated, instead saying that it was a split-second decision that he made at the urging of another member of the group. Number 3. The Left-Handed Whopper. One of the most famous April Fool's Day pranks came in 1998 when Burger King published a full-page ad in USA Today promoting a left-handed Whopper. It claimed to have the same ingredients and condiments as the original Whopper, but had all condiments rotated 180 degrees to stop lettuce and other toppings from spilling out of the burger. The ad had a quote from Burger King's Senior Vice President for Marketing, Jim Watkins, describing the sandwich as the ultimate have it your way for our left-handed customers. It also said that the left-handed Whopper would only be available in the United States, but that the company eventually planned to expand expand its availability to restaurants in other countries with large left-handed populations. Hopefully, you understand the humor behind this campaign without us having to explain that the Whopper's condiments are already distributed evenly throughout the burger, and that left-handed diners don't really suffer from a higher tendency for the contents to spill. But many of America's 32 million lefties apparently didn't understand it was a joke, and the restaurant was flooded with thousands of orders for the left-handed Whopper. Other customers requested their own right-handed version of the sandwich. The day after the ad went live, the company revealed that the non-existent burger was an unexpected hit. Burger King clarified that the campaign was simply an April Fool's Day prank, and that the Whopper is indeed an ambidextrous sandwich. Number 2. Seth Stonerock and Derek Greenley. It's unclear whether Seth Stonerock and Derek Greenley knew how dangerous it was to hide a stop sign by wrapping it up in plastic, but that's what they decided to do at an intersection in Circleville, Ohio back in 2011, making the sign extremely difficult to see. Unable to spot the sign, an elderly woman drove straight through the intersection without slowing down or stopping, and was hit by another vehicle. 85-year-old Mary Spangler and her 81-year-old sister, Norma Jean Shea, both died due to their injuries. Investigators soon discovered that Stonerock and Greenley had bragged on Facebook about the thoughtless prank. Surveillance footage captured the young men buying cellophane at a local Walmart. Neither of the young men had passed criminal records, and they had both recently graduated from high school. Any future plans they may have had were now interrupted with involuntary manslaughter charges. The case against Greenley was soon dropped after prosecutors decided there wasn't enough evidence against him to move forward. Stonerock took a plea deal and admitted to 2 counts of reckless homicide in exchange for getting the manslaughter charge dropped, and 1 count of tampering with a traffic control device. Thanks to his history of being an outstanding community member before the prank, he was released from prison after serving just 8 months of a 4-year sentence. Number 1. Jaffa alien invasion. On April Fool's Day 2010, the Jordanian newspaper Al-Ghad published a front-page news article claiming that UFOs landed in the desert near the town of Jaffa. The strange aircraft's pilots were described as 3-meter creatures, and the piece mentioned that the unidentified vehicles caused a massive communications blackout in the area. According to the article, the flying saucers lit up the night sky as they descended toward the Earth. Naturally, Jaffa's residents broke into a panic. Many people ran into the street, while other scared civilians kept their children locked up at home to protect them from the otherworldly visitors. Mayor Mohammed Milihan prepared an evacuation order for the town's 13,000 residents, and he even notified the authorities of his plans. After learning that the whole thing was just a hoax, Milihan was unamused. He admonished the newspaper for terrifying the people of Jaffa and said he was considering suing the publication for its lies. The newspaper apologized for the stunt, but didn't explain why it specifically targeted Jaffa with the prank. According to the BBC, the region is notorious for having military bases which were once used for joint training exercises by the United States Armed Forces and the Jordanian Army. The bases were also once occupied by Al-Qaeda militants. After realizing the extent of the panic that was caused, Al-Ghad's managing editor Moussa Barhoume said that the news report was blown out of proportion. He also explained that the purpose of the prank was to amuse, not scare people. It may seem shocking that even Jaffa's mayor fell for the elaborate hoax, especially if you live in a country where April Fool's Day pranks are more popular, but the tradition isn't common in Jordan, which helps explain why the UFO prank spread like wildfire. The prank was reminiscent of the panic that erupted in the United States during a 1938 radio broadcast known as War of the Worlds. Aired during Halloween over the CBS radio network and narrated by Orson Welles, the series went down in history for causing widespread panic about a possible alien invasion. The series didn't have a large following, and to this day the scale of the hysteria is heavily disputed. While most versions of the story talk about complete mayhem, evidence suggests that the public's reaction was not quite so dramatic. But the fictional news did generate an overwhelming influx of phone calls, and the studio was flooded by both police officers and reporters. The reaction in Jaffa was arguably much more extreme, especially considering how it almost triggered an evacuation. Luckily, the needless squandering of resources was avoided.
11. Burglar falls through ceiling. In a hilariously botched burglary that was captured on camera in October 2019, a female suspect could be seen falling through the ceiling of a restaurant in Ojai, California. On her way down to the floor, she struck a food prep counter. The woman and a male suspect allegedly made off with hundreds of dollars in cash and several bottles of wine. In an appeal to the public for information about the burglars, the Ventura County Sheriff's Office released the hilarious footage. It's unclear whether the suspects were ever identified or captured. In another bungled burglary that occurred in Ventura County in 2020, a suspect identified as 25-year-old Cody Brynarski was seen entering through the ceiling of a Simi Valley laundromat. He attempted to leave the business through the front door, but when he saw the cops outside, he allegedly re-entered the laundromat and tried to escape through the ceiling. He fell during the attempt and was quickly taken into custody on suspicion of felony burglary. 10. Paul Sinclair. Employees at a bank in Seminole, Florida, were less than convinced when a man entered the business in October 2022 and tried to make it look like he had a gun by putting his hand under his shirt and forming the shape of the weapon with his index finger. Later identified by the Pinellas County Sheriff's Office as a 56-year-old homeless man from Largo named Paul Sinclair, the thief made off with $120. He was arrested on suspicion of robbery less than 10 minutes after fleeing the scene. According to a probable cause affidavit, Sinclair admitted to using his hand to form a gun shape underneath his shirt, and he was not under the influence of drugs or alcohol. At the time of his arrest, he was also reportedly wanted on an arson charge. While the outcome of his case is unclear, records show that nobody by Sinclair's name is being held at the Pinellas County Jail. 9. Brian Garfield Ford. One evening in June of 2023, a group of friends dined and dashed at a restaurant in Austell, Georgia. Luckily for the police, one of the suspects left his cell phone behind, and a staff member had snapped a photo of the license plate on the car the non-paying customers had left in. Law enforcement's initial goal was to hold the group responsible for the $100 tab they walked out on. But the situation quickly became more complicated when investigators discovered that the phone belonged to a young man who was wanted for murder. 20-year-old Brian Garfield Ford had foolishly used a selfie as his log screen, which made the process of identifying him both quick and easy. The license plate in the photo captured by an employee also belonged to Ford. He was taken into custody just hours later after a license plate reader detected his car in Brookhaven. Ford is accused of fatally shooting a 20-year-old man in Decatur in March. Just months earlier, in September 2022, he was allegedly caught walking around at a high school football game with 3 guns in his possession. He faces charges of murder, theft by receiving stolen property, and being a convicted felon in possession of a firearm. 8. Ruben Parvon. When 41-year-old Ruben Parvon was accused of robbing a thrift store in Derry, New Hampshire called Finders Keepers in May 2013, he insisted that the situation was a big mix-up. Parvon was identified as the suspect in the case based on surveillance footage of a man taking a box from the store's front porch. Based on the video, he appeared to have a child in his care at the time. He was charged with theft and contributing to the delinquency of a minor. In an interview with local channel News 9, Parvon said that he took the store's name Finders Keepers literally, and that he thought the items on the porch were there for the taking. He admitted to taking a DVD player and a cooking appliance. Parvon further explained that when he noticed the same collection of items sitting on the porch for several weeks, it further solidified his belief that the merchandise was free to a good home. The shop's owner, Laura Barker, told local station WCVB that she didn't believe Parvon's defense, stating, "I don't know of any stores where there's free stuff. It would be nice if there were. I'd be there on a regular basis myself." Barker went on to say that the least Parvon could have done was check with someone at the store to see if the items were free before he took them. To Parvon's credit, he returned the merchandise to the store, so luckily Finders Keepers didn't suffer any major losses. He insisted that he wasn't a bad person or a bad father, and said he was intent on clearing his name. 7. Chris Thomasson. When the Placer County Sheriff's Office in California had trouble identifying a suspected thief in March 2019, the agency took to social media to help tracking him down. According to a Facebook post, the suspect was accused of using an elderly victim's stolen credit card for months. A surveillance photo included in the post showed a man in a mechanic's uniform with the name Chris embroidered on the front. Thanks to a tip that came in less than 20 minutes after the post appeared online, investigators identified the suspect as Chris Thomasson. They were unable to arrest him at the time because they couldn't find him, and it would later turn out that he'd been on an out-of-state hiatus. Finally, 4 months after the sheriff's office first asked for help identifying Thomasson, he was caught and arrested in Sacramento County. He was extradited to Placer County on a felony identity theft charge. 6. Dominic Antonio Alfonseca. In a dim-witted crime that earned him the nickname of the Instagram bank robber, 23-year-old Dominic Antonio Alfonseca entered a bank in Virginia Beach in 2015 and handed the teller a note demanding cash. Between the time he fled the scene and his arrest 20 minutes later, he posted 2 videos of the robbery and a photo of the demand note on his Instagram account. During a post-arrest jailhouse interview with local station WTKR, Alfonseca claimed that he didn't rob the bank, but that he asked for the money. In his words, the teller could have said no and I could have left. The accused thief said that he posted the videos and photo to social media to protect himself against any potential allegations that he was armed, and because he wanted his followers to see what he was doing. In fact, one of the things that motivated him to rob the bank was a desire for more social media followers. He admitted this at his sentencing hearing while apologizing to the bank, the teller, and the teller's family. Alfonseca claimed he was in the wrong mental state when he committed the robbery, and by all appearances, he seemed remorseful while the judge imposed the nearly 3-year prison sentence. Shortly after his sentencing, however, Alfonseca had told WTKR that he wasn't really sorry for his actions. He even referred to being in jail as a vacation. Alfonseca went on to say that he might be guilty by law, but he's not guilty by logic, at least not by his own logic. Furthermore, he hoped the publicity he received after the crime would help him break into the music industry. 5. Dennis Hawkins. In July 2010, a man dressed as a female entered a Pittsburgh area bank armed with a BB gun he'd just shoplifted from a nearby Kmart store. He donned a blonde wig and fake breasts, but the disguise was less than convincing, considering the fact that he had apparently forgotten to shave his goatee off. The suspect approached a teller with a note demanding cash and warned her not to put any exploding dye packs in with the money or he would harm her family. She put a dye pack in with the money anyway, and the thief could be seen on surveillance footage dropping the envelope full of cash when it exploded all over him behind the bank. Later identified as 48-year-old Dennis Hawkins, the suspect walked over to a nearby gas station and asked some people for a ride. When they said no, he allegedly climbed into a woman's car. She exited the vehicle with her keys in hand and called the police. Hawkins was still sitting in the car when officers arrived. According to authorities, Hawkins claimed that he'd found the dye-covered money behind the bank. CCTV footage suggested otherwise, and Hawkins was taken into custody on suspicion of robbery. 4. Trevor Jones. Stephanie White arrived at her Gwinnett County, Georgia home one day in November 2011 to find a stranger's car running in her driveway. She turned the ignition off and took the owner's keys and wallet. White then drove to the end of her street and watched as the suspect, later identified as 34-year-old Trevor Jones, allegedly put several of her belongings in his car. When he realized that someone had removed the keys, he ran from the scene and jumped into a small lake nearby. A large-scale manhunt ensued, but the police failed to find or capture Jones. Later that day, another homeowner in the neighborhood arrived home to find puddles of water throughout their house, along with a pile of wet clothes. They also found Stephanie White's stolen camera and noticed that Jones had left himself logged into Facebook on their computer. At the time, Jones was on parole for a previous burglary case. Authorities issued a warrant for his arrest for burglary and trespassing, but the outcome of the case is unclear. 3. Nicholas Wigg. James Wood arrived at his Dakota County, Minnesota home one day in 2014 and found his door unlocked and a window screen removed. He noticed several items missing from his house, including cash, a checkbook, credit cards, an iPod, a watch, and keys. Wood also discovered that the suspect Nicholas Wigg had used his computer to log onto Facebook and had forgotten to log out. Next to the computer, there was a pile of wet clothes and shoes. While driving through the neighborhood later that day, Wood spotted a man on the sidewalk who resembled the person in the Facebook profile that had been left open on his computer. He called the police and Wigg was quickly taken into custody. During questioning, Wigg allegedly admitted to the burglary and to logging into Facebook while robbing Woods' house. He also claimed that he planned to return all the stolen items. Authorities charged Wigg with felony burglary, which can come with a sentence of up to 10 years in prison and up to $20,000 in fines. He was held on $25,000 bond, and while the outcome of the case is unclear, it happened nearly a decade ago. It's probably safe to assume that Wigg squared away his legal issues and hopefully moved on with his life in a more lawful fashion. 2. Ruben Zarate. When a Chicago man named Ruben Zarate attempted to rob a muffler store one morning in 2008, the manager, Jose Cedar, told him that only the owner could open the safe and to return later that week when the owner would be there. Zarate gave Cedar 2 phone numbers and told the manager to call him when the owner was at the shop. Cedar reportedly agreed to do so, as long as he would get a cut of the money, but he called the cops shortly after Zarate left the business. 4 plainclothes officers responded to the call and devised a plan to lure Zarate back to the shop, at which point they'd take him into custody. There are conflicting versions of exactly what happened next, but a few things are clear. Zarate returned to the shop. The police thought he had a gun and saw fit to open fire, and Zarate was shot in the back. Zarate suffered serious injuries, including fractured vertebrae and damage to multiple internal organs. He survived after undergoing emergency surgery and was charged with aggravated robbery. The accused criminal later sued the officer who shot him for allegedly using excessive force. He claimed that the gun he was carrying was non-functional, that he never pulled it out from his waistband, and that he never threatened anyone with it. Zarate further argued that the gun fell out of his pants as he tried running away from the scene. While the outcome of the civil suit is unclear, the court denied the officer's motion to drop the case. There's no question that Zarate acted stupidly, but the court questioned the police team's use of what it described as elaborate apprehension tactics, which seemed a little overboard considering the fact that Zarate was expected to show up at the store willingly, and taking him into custody should have been a fairly straightforward process. 1. Drunk driver dials 911 on himself. In March 2023, 911 dispatchers in Lancaster County, Nebraska, received a 911 call from a man claiming that he'd nearly been run off the road by a driver traveling on the wrong side of the highway. He provided the operator with his exact location and was pulled over by a deputy just moments later. By the time the deputy approached the vehicle, the man realized he was actually the one traveling on the wrong side of the highway. He owned up to going in the wrong direction, but claimed it was because he'd missed his exit. According to authorities, the driver's blood alcohol level was more than twice the legal limit for driving. As he was being taken into custody, the man confessed to making the 911 call about a wrong-way driver almost running him off the road. During the hilarious admission, which was captured on camera, he also called himself a name referring to the stupidity he'd displayed that evening. Thanks for watching. Would you rather be forever laughed at as a dumb criminal over a young and dumb but forgivable mistake that doesn't necessarily reflect the person you are today, or feared as a highly intelligent but malicious person who many suspect of committing shamefully cruel acts? Let us know in the comments below and remember to subscribe. See you soon. Bye.